Welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about successor holders and beneficiaries. If you have a registered account like an RRSP or TFSA or FHSA, and you have a common law partner or a spouse, then you're definitely going to want to assign these designations to them. Let's start with the TFSA. If you have a TFSA and a common law partner or a spouse, then it's important that you designate them as a successor holder on that account. If you happen to die and you have that designation to your spouse, this allows your spouse to take over the TFSA completely tax-free. There will be two options. Your spouse can keep your TFSA open and your spouse can have two TFSAs, or they can roll your TFSA into their TFSA completely tax-free. No contribution room is needed or anything like that. You can just put that money on top of what you have already. So for example, let's say I had $100,000 in my TFSA and my wife had $100,000 in her TFSA, and let's say we both had $10,000 worth of contribution room. If I happened to die and I had her as the successor holder, she could inherit that TFSA, my TFSA, and put it right into her TFSA so that she now has $200,000 in her TFSA, and she would still have her $10,000 contribution. She would lose my $10,000 contribution. I can't pass that on when I die, but she could keep her contribution limit. Now, if I had named her a beneficiary instead of a successor holder, then what happens is, upon my death, my TFSA can still get passed to her completely tax-free, but any money earned after that, so all the growth and the dividends, will count as taxable income to the estate. So essentially, the TFSA would no longer be a TFSA upon my death. So had I named her a successor holder, that TFSA could remain a TFSA, but because she was a beneficiary, it stops becoming a TFSA upon my death. So it's really important that you do designate your spouse as a successor holder, not a beneficiary. Now, what happens if we both die or my wife has already predeceased me? Well, what we did on our accounts, on our TFSAs, is we named our boys the contingency beneficiaries. So basically what that means is if both my wife and I die at the same time, then the money in our TFSAs goes to both our boys and they are considered beneficiaries. And we have it set up so that each boy would get 50% of whatever is in the TFSA. But I cannot name one of our boys a successor holder. That designation can only go to a spouse. This is another reason to love the TFSA. You can pass part of your estate, whatever money is in there, completely tax-free to your beneficiaries. RRSPs, however, work a little bit different. You cannot name a successor holder on an RRSP. You can only name a beneficiary. If you have named your spouse or common law partner as a beneficiary, then it works fairly similar as a successor holder. The money in the RRSP can be rolled over to your spouse's RRSP tax-free. Again, no contribution room is necessary or anything like that. So again, as an example, let's say this time I have $100,000 in RRSP money and my wife has $100,000 in RRSPs. I have $10,000 in contribution room. My wife has $10,000 in contribution room. If I died and named my wife as the beneficiary, then upon my death, the RRSP can be rolled over to her RRSP, provided she does fill out some paperwork on that. And that form that she needs to fill out is Form T2019. So if she filled that form out after my death, then she can roll my RRSP right into hers. So she would have $200,000 in her RRSP. No tax consequences there. And she would still have her $10,000 contribution limit available. The rollover doesn't affect her contribution room, but my $10,000 contribution room would be gone. If I did not name her as a beneficiary on my RRSP, or I named someone other than my spouse as the beneficiary, then as of my death, the RRSP actually gets deemed sold and closed. All the investments in there get sold and it gets added to the estate and is counted as taxable income. So it's extremely important that you do name your spouse a beneficiary to your RRSPs. What about other registered accounts? Well, if you have a LIRA in your name, then you want to name your spouse a beneficiary, and these rules would be the exact same as an RRSP. If you've converted your RRSP or your LIRA into a RIF or a LIF, then the spouse needs to have a successor annuitant designation to them. The successor annuitant designation works very similar to the successor holder designation. So essentially, your spouse would just take over your RIF or LIF. If you have an FHSA, all you can do is designate a beneficiary to your spouse, and there aren't that many tax advantages to it. The only way you could transfer the FHSA tax-free to your spouse is designate them as a beneficiary, and your spouse would need FHSA room or RRSP contribution room. If your spouse does not have FHSA contribution room or RRSP contribution room, then the money just counts as taxable income. If you have an RDSP, there are no ways to inherit that tax-free. Basically, upon your death, the RDSPs get sold, and the grants and the bonds that you have received in the last 10 years must go back to the government, and the rest just counts as taxable income in your estate. So again, I can't stress this enough. Please assign the appropriate designation to your spouse. Just to recap, your spouse should be the successor holder on a TFSA, a beneficiary on an RRSP or a LIRA or a FHSA, and on a LIF or a RIF, your spouse should be a successor annuitant. If you provide those designations to your spouse and you die, your spouse will save thousands of dollars in taxes. So I hope this video has shown you how important those designations are on certain accounts. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to stay informed of some of my other ones, please subscribe below and have a wonderful day.